here to Citywide Energy Visioning. We are the Office of Sustainability, and we're in charge of implementing Greenworks, which is the city's sustainability plan. It's our vision for a sustainable Philadelphia for all. It has 8 subvisions. Vision 1 is that all Philadelphians have access to healthy, affordable food and clean drinking water. Vision 2, all Philadelphians have breathe healthy air indoor and out. Vision 3, which is the one we'll dig into today, all Philadelphians efficiently use clean energy that they can afford. Vision 4 is our climate vision. All Philadelphians are prepared for climate and reduce our carbon pollution. Vision 5 is what we call our quality natural resources vision. That's that all Philadelphians benefit from plants, parks, trees, stormwater management, waterways, sort of what you traditionally think of as the natural environment. Vision 6 is that all Philadelphians have access to safe, affordable, and low-carbon transportation. Vision 7, all Philadelphians waste less and keep our neighborhoods clean. Yeah, and I should just say, if you want to, the whole plan is up here if you want to read along. Vision 8 is that we recognize all of these other 7 visions will bring opportunities to Philadelphia, and we want those opportunities to be spread to all Philadelphians. So those are educational, business, employment opportunities. And this vision framework seems pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but it is the result of a year and a half of talking to a lot of folks out in the world to understand what worked in the previous iteration of Greenworks and what didn't, and what they wanted to see. So some things that specifically came from feedback are, we added an indoor air quality goal, which we didn't have historically because we have a really hard time measuring that. We also added a lot of an equity lens. We really tried to deepen our equity focus in this version of Greenworks. We added a litter lens into our waste goal, and we are focusing now on the reduction of waste generation instead of just increasing the diversion of the waste we do generate. And so, yeah, we spent a lot of time talking to folks, both out in neighborhoods and subject matter experts, asking what we should do in our update. And we did hear, focus more on equity, focus on quality over quantity if you need to in certain areas, and also to move beyond city government work. So Greenworks version 1.0 was pretty successful, I might be biased, at institutionalizing sustainability as a core function of city government. But we were really challenged by folks as we updated to do a better job of including how external folks can plug into the work. And so for each of these 8 visions, we all put together a list of how individuals, institutions, and communities can help progress this work forward. And those are all available on our website. They're called Greenworks on the ground. So now I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into Vision 4, which is, again, our climate vision. And we're working on both adaptation and mitigation, which is to say we're both trying to reduce the causes of climate change and adapt to the changes that climate are already bringing to Philadelphia. And why are we working to reduce carbon pollution? What do we mean when we say carbon? This is our attempt to bring that esoteric climate pollution down to earth. So this is the carbon cycle. You can see that there is carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere. That keeps the earth warm, which is lovely, which means we can all live here, right? But we all know that you can get too warm. So as more carbon is building up in the atmosphere, it's basically like having too many blankets and overheating. That's the basic definition of climate change. There are natural pathways that carbon takes. It sinks into the ocean, it comes out of the ocean, it sinks into vegetation, it comes out of vegetation as we deforest. And there's also a ton of carbon stored in fossil fuels, which we are now unearthing and burning. And so these yellow arrows basically show that sort of natural pathways of the carbon cycle. And we know that both deforestation and the lack of vegetation is causing more carbon to be concentrated in the atmosphere, as well as that burning of fossil fuels. So that's why we care about carbon. That's why we're talking about reducing our carbon pollution. And to take this esoteric, what is climate change, theoretically, well, I'll tell you what it means on the ground in Philadelphia and why we care. We are already seeing the consequences of climate change in Philly. Since 2010, we've seen the two wettest years on record in Philadelphia. At the same time, the 2 hottest summers on record. We've seen the 2 snowiest winters on record. I'm here to tell you that the climate projections show that as the average annual temperature increases in Philadelphia Philadelphia, we will have more winter precip. So now you can tell everyone who says, "But it's snowing, it means that means global warming is not happening." That, in fact, that is projected to happen in Philadelphia. It's not counter to global warming here. We also have had the year with the most days over 90 on record. We had the wettest day on record. We had 2 hurricanes and a novel meteorological phenomenon called a derecho. So did anyone here know what a derecho was before 2012? I didn't. I'm not raising my hand. Yeah. So in 2012 we had this crazy straight windstorm, basically tornado force winds, but in a straight line that swept through the Mid-Atlantic and caused a lot of havoc. And so we're just experiencing these climate changes. We know that oftentimes when we have these events that there's many things operationally that the city has to do. We're left holding the bag. We've got to prepare for these going forward. So what are we doing about all of that? We've made some commitments. We have Mayor Kenny, even during his transition, committed to an 80% carbon emissions reduction by 2050. That is sort of the gold standard amongst cities, is trying to work towards that. We call it 80 by 50. Just at the beginning of this month, when our president canceled the United States participation in the Paris Climate Agreement, we further committed to meeting 26 to 28% of our carbon emissions reductions goals by 2025. That's us saying in Philadelphia we will meet those Paris standards. We're not alone in that. A lot of other mayors, hundreds of other mayors representing hundreds of millions of other Americans also signed on to that. That's both a substantive commitment, but it's also our olive branch to the rest of the world, telling them that not all of the United States is disinterested in these goals. We're in it with them. And then just last week, the Mayor Kenny signed on to the Mayors for Clean Energy Pledge, which is a pledge to move Philadelphia's energy system toward 100% clean energy. So we're really happy to be working toward these awesome goals, and I'm going to pass it over to Rich to talk to you about just exactly how we're going to meet those goals, or how we're trying to meet those goals.
Hello. Please give me a thumbs up, thumbs down in terms of voice. Also, just a check on temperature in here. Is everybody feeling pretty good? Good, excellent. So most of the slides we're going to show today are pretty new, but I've probably heard Sarah tell that derecho joke like 24 times in the last 3 years. So that piece, we've been road testing that for a little bit. So again, my name is Rich Free. I'm in the Office of Sustainability. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. Really appreciate you taking some time to hear from us, and then hopefully we'll get to hear from all of you as well. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about kind of where we are and where we're going. So Sarah just talked a lot about our goals to reduce Philadelphia's carbon footprint. So for us to do that, kind of the first step is to actually know what is our carbon footprint, what's in it. So what this slide is attempting to show, and you can all tell me later how successful I was at this, is basically what are the sources of Philadelphia's carbon footprint. So really what we're talking about here are the carbon emissions that we can attribute to things happening within the city of Philadelphia, as well as the electricity that's generated outside of the city at all of our power plants that are powering our buildings, increasingly our transportation, and some the other pieces of our lives, right? So the big takeaway here, this 80%, that's our buildings and industry. So basically we're saying all of the buildings in Philadelphia, again, plus the electricity that powers them, as well as the industry that we have here locally in Philadelphia, they account for 80% of our carbon footprint. So today we're going to be talking primarily about the built environment for exactly this reason. This is the primary source of Philadelphia's local emissions. The other sources are really important too. So transportation is the second biggest chunk and has a lot of other important benefits and a lot of great challenges for us as Philadelphians to think about. So there is a transportation action planning process that's about to get underway at the city. If folks are interested in that, I'm definitely happy to kind of pass some information on. It'll probably be kicking off this fall. There's some really exciting work happening on the waste front. It's a very small piece of our carbon footprint, but for those of us that are Philadelphians, we know that waste and litter are a huge issue in our city every day. It was one of the major issues that we heard when we were out on the road talking about Greenworks last year. So last fall, Mayor Kenny committed to developing a zero waste and litter plan. He that's kind of happening at the cabinet level. So there's lots of fancy people at the city and lots of community engagement happening right now to develop that plan. It'll be coming out later this summer. So once again, please stay tuned. There's lots of exciting work happening on that. But again, today we're focused primarily on our buildings and industry. And I think, again, I just kind of, my goal here today is to talk a little bit about where we are and where we're going. So there is some good news here, right? So what you're seeing here is that between 2006 and 2014, Philadelphia's carbon emissions from our buildings and industry have declined about 15%. So that's pretty good, right? So we're making progress, but what we're not seeing is the pace and the level of emissions reductions we would need to meet, we would need to see to meet the commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement, and definitely under Mayor Kenny's commitment to an 80% reduction by 2050. So that's kind of part of what we're here to talk about today is, how can we kind of shift that trajectory to say, we've seen great progress, but we need to do more. One place where we have seen really pretty significant progress is where the city has direct control over our own buildings and our own energy usage. So at the municipal level, the city-owned buildings, street lighting, we've seen a reduction of about a quarter, 25% in our carbon footprint between 2006 and 2015, the most recent data we have there. A big part of this is due to energy efficiency in our buildings. The building we're in right now, we recently completed a multi-million-dollar energy efficiency retrofit, which has seen really tremendous savings, both in terms of occupant comfort. I work in this building. It's a lot nicer than it was a couple years ago, but also in terms of energy savings. We're saving more than $1 million a year across the 4 buildings that were part of this retrofit. For this building, the Municipal Services Building across the street, Criminal Justice Center, and City Hall. So that's just one example of kind of the emissions reductions, the cost savings, the co-benefits that can come from investing in energy efficiency. But again, we recognize that it's only one piece of the puzzle. So we've been working to start to develop a kind of looking at what our options are for more renewable energy generation on city-owned facilities. We'll have some really exciting things on that as well later this summer, so please stay tuned. So all of that to say that Philadelphia is committed to energy planning. We kind of committed to this process as we were updating Greenworks last fall. This was something that was kind of asked of us to say, let's really kind of take a step back and understand, what can the city do and what can we all do to move towards our energy goals. So there's 2 work products that we're kind of developing right now. The first one, which we're not going to talk too much about today, is our Municipal Energy Master Plan. And that, again, is focused specifically on city-owned buildings and assets, both on energy efficiency, generation of renewable energy, building operations, tenant engagement, all of those kind of things will be part of that plan, which we're hoping to release later this summer. If folks are interested in learning more about that, definitely come talk to us, particularly Adam, who's leading that process. But we're here today to talk about the second piece, which is the citywide energy vision, which sounds like a pretty nebulous thing. Like, what do we actually mean by that? So our goal today, one of the things we're hoping to do is to kind of explain to you what we mean, see if that kind of gels with what you're thinking, and maybe we can kind of continue that conversation. But what we're talking about with this citywide energy vision are a few things. One is kind of the slides that I just showed and we're about to show a bit more on, which is basically what are the existing trends in Philadelphia? What have we seen in terms of progress so far on improving energy efficiency, reducing our carbon footprint, the other co-benefits, air quality, cost savings, job creation that come with that? What are the areas of focus for future work? Right, so we're saying, again, we need to move this trajectory, we need to hasten our efforts in response to perhaps what we're seeing at the federal level. So kind of identifying what some of those areas of focus could be, both for the city, at the state and federal level, and then for us as residents, advocates, and businesses. And then the last goal here is really to kind of talk about this as a tool to start a conversation, right? So I think our goal is basically to kind of have us be on as much of the kind of the same level as we can. Say, here's what we collectively understand about Philadelphia's energy system. Here's the goals that we see. How can we work together to achieve those goals? So that's really the outcome that we're hoping for. And we're open to kind of having that conversation with all of you to understand, back to Sarah's first question, are there other things that need to be part of this toolkit to help you be better advocates and be better in your work so that you can push us and we can kind of have that two-way dialogue moving forward. So I just want to talk a little bit about the timeline, kind of where we are and where we're going, and then we'll pause for questions. So I mentioned, this process really kind of started when we committed to doing energy planning last fall as part of the Greenworks update. We wrote Greenworks not knowing what the outcome of last fall's election would be. I think we probably had an idea in mind, but as many of us did. So we published Greenworks in early November, and then we kind of started on this process of working with consultants to kind of model the current and future energy system. We had a webinar that some of you were probably on in January where we talked in pretty a fair bit of detail and nuance about some kind of specific modeling questions and energy policies. And I think I was really taken aback by how much interest there was in that. And we heard from a lot of people, this is really fantastic, but I feel like I need so much more information, and I feel like this process maybe needs to slow down a little bit. So we took that advice, and we kind of spent the spring continuing to do this modeling, but also talking to a lot of you. So we had a listening session in May. Show of hands, who was at the listening session in May? Thank you all who came. We put out a survey. I hope many of you were able to take the survey. We had more than 100 respondents on that. We've talked to many of you. We've talked to you individually, over email or in person. We've talked to you as groups. And I think we've heard from a lot of you kind of what your priorities are. And we hope that that's reflected in what we're going to show today. But this is all a draft. This is all us still kind of trying to suss out what we see as the opportunities and kind of how we can help you. So please, as we're going through, feel free, when we have Q&A to tell us, oh, that perfectly makes sense, or maybe there's another opportunity that we didn't see. So that brings us to today. These sessions, we had one on Saturday, we're having one today. Hello to everyone who's listening on Facebook Live.
Hello?
Hello, is this on? Thank you. So that brings us to today. And the goal here, again, is to kind of talk a little bit about where we are, where we're going. From here, we're going to probably spend the summer writing. We're actually going to try to put a thing out in September, a report of some kind to be determined. We're going to have that out for public draft. So all of you will have an opportunity to read it. If you're so interested, let us know. Again, does this seem like it's hitting the mark? Are there things we missed? Are there opportunities we didn't consider? We'll probably publish a final version of that in December, along with the first update to the Greenworks annual report. But I think the point I just wanted to emphasize on this slide is that this conversation doesn't end today. This conversation doesn't end in December when we publish whatever Citywide Energy Vision report comes out. We're really hoping that this is the beginning of a longer conversation with all of you about what your priorities are, help us understand kind of what levers you see at the city level, and we can also kind of discuss what some of those levers are at other places in government, or things that we kind of need to do together in the community. So we're really excited to have that conversation with all of you. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and pause. I think Adam and Sarah are going to come up, and we're just going to take probably about 10 minutes worth of questions here. So we're going to commit to trying to keep our answers as succinct as possible. If you could also try to keep your questions fairly brief. There are a lot of folks here. We might try to take some Facebook Live questions as well if we have a chance. So it would be great to just hear from you, but do maybe try to be somewhat succinct. Thank you.
Yes. This is kind of a linguistic or rhetorical question,
Sure.
so it's going to be expansive and not like specific.
Sure.
But I'm wondering about the difference between a municipal response that is a master plan and a citywide response that is just a vision, and how like the thought process behind using those things, and how we can actually then achieve this vision and implement it as a plan.
Sure. So the reason why we're calling the municipal one a plan and the citywide one a vision is because we have control over the municipal implementation, right? And so we're really comfortable with planning for ourselves and being, accountable to implement the plan and get all of the, we can say, here's our to-do list, and we can say, well, we got through items 1 through 3 and 4 got a little bit messy. In terms of the vision, there are many more actors, and the energy system is much larger than the city, and so one of the things we heard when we went out and did Greenworks feedback sessions is that people wanted us to be more explicit about where we controlled things and where we didn't control things, and then where those other points of influence were. And so the vision will talk about where the city can move the vision, but it'll also talk about all of the other actors and where their points of influence are. And so that's the difference, is that it won't be quite as clear cut. The 10 to-dos, we might be able to check off one, but the other 9 might go to other 9 actors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So is there a budget for, in terms of the master plan, that if you want to implement things, that, like, does the Office of Sustainability have the decision-making power over such a budget for?
So there's two answers to that question. One is that we do sit in on all of the capital planning meetings. So we do advise on capital budgeting overall for the whole city, but we also have our own capital budget where we do spend dollars on specific projects that push energy efficiency.
But I think the other piece of that is that as we're going through the energy master plan, and the reason we're not releasing it today is because we need to kind of bring that to folks that do have control over budgetary decisions. So we envision a lot of the master plan to be cost savings. A lot of it is energy efficiency, which does kind of pay for itself, so it's smart investments. But we need to have those conversations. So the idea is that we want to publish this plan once we've had those conversations, not before. And at that point, we hope to have more buy-in, in terms of what the actual spending is. I can also just say that performance contracting has been one of the areas that both the mayor has been interested in, the city council's been interested in, so we intend on using that tool.
Could you explain that?
Yeah, so the performance contracting is basically paying for energy efficiency with the savings, with the future savings. So taking out a bond and then basically paying that bond or that loan over time with the energy savings. So we've used that for the Quadplex project, our Center City project. We're looking at that right now. We've got a project open at the Art Museum, and we're going to replicate it from there on out as well. But that's not the only tool that we're looking. Rebuild investments, we're going to integrate energy efficiency in as well. We're also looking at some renewable energy investments. Again, there's a lot more to come on what the municipal energy master plan is going to need.
And just to be clear, with guaranteed energy savings projects, we don't have to front any capital then. So that's the key piece there. That's why it appeals to us in a resource constrained environment. Yes.
Can you talk about how the Philadelphia Energy Authority work fits with this work and how that's coordinated?
Sure, absolutely. So the Philadelphia Energy Authority is working on a lot of projects that fit very closely with this. Maybe you've seen last week they had a Solarized press conference where they're working on trying to increase solar installations on residential rooftops. You'll see as Adam walks us through some of the modeling of potential interventions, he can pick out to you where the Energy Authority might play a role in implementation.
Yeah, I guess just in essence, authorities can serve functions and do things the city government can't do directly. And I think we're willing to explore a lot of different ways of that. So I don't think we necessarily even know all the ways that can happen. If you think of other authorities in the city, whether it's the parking authority or that's not a city controlled authority, so probably not a good example. Or SEPTA, which is a regional authority, they've got different ways of doing different things. Energy Authority is obviously much smaller authority than that right now, and really municipally seated in terms of its funding, but the possibilities are very broad, so we'll see.
Our interest is citywide energy or emissions reduction. So where do we take that conversation?
Yeah. So are you saying beyond municipal
Beyond what's in your
government?
control.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point of having two products.
This little bit and that little bit.
Yep. So that's the point of having two products. The one where again we have explicit control, and the one where what we're trying to do is move from general to specific and provide everyone a baseline of information that everyone agrees is the information we're working with, and then joint decision making based on that information, right? So again, we'll be outlining things in the citywide energy vision that we don't necessarily control as a municipality, but we are trying to get everyone on the same sort of energy fluency.
That's what we would push our city council members.
Well, it depends on the intervention, right? So there'll be there's going to be myriad different. There's going to be players who can, some of it's going to be the PUC where there's a lever. Some of it will be council.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is we're not just talking about city council. The city government can lead, and city council can certainly influence that. But city council and the mayor are not the only kind of players in this system. And in fact, I would argue in an energy system, they're relatively minor players when you look at what is happening regionally is really influenced by the Public Utilities Commission, the state legislator, the governor, and then all the way up to FERC, the federal government, and the federal legislation.
Yeah, so I think we want to be explicit about where those decision points, I think we're trying to help people understand who's controlling what and how they can influence them, yeah.
And that's not to say that there won't be pieces of so we'll show in a moment, there's basically we're developing what we're kind of talking about as like, a playbook or, sample actions. Some of those things will be at the city level. There are some things that we can do to, whether that's informing residents or like changing certain requirements that will reduce our carbon footprint, improve the efficiency of our buildings, promote renewable energy. All of those things, there are pieces of those that are within the city's control. And some of those we've done before, and some of them we haven't done yet, and we're excited to explore more and for you to push us on. But I do think that this other piece of kind of beyond Philadelphia is really important.
I think we've got time for one more question.
We have more questions to answer them and after we go through the modeling.
Can you give us a little bit more detail on how you're thinking in the vision you would, you describe the other entities that have control over some of this, like how would we be putting out recommended actions or something like that in the vision? Like how do you see that?
So I don't think that we're there in terms of format, but if you look in Greenworks, basically for each of the 8 visions, we had a place where there was a Beyond Philadelphia section, and that was our attempt to start to outline the external influences on our internal systems and decision making. And so I think philosophically we're trying to meet that same need here. But we, let us know if there are, if that worked for you guys, if there are other ways we can identify those opportunities for you.
I would just say, I think as we go through the rest of the presentation, it might become a little bit clearer, so maybe we can revisit that question at the end. So I think that's really an important piece of this. We want this to be useful for all.
All right, more questions at the end.
Great. Well, thank you all for those questions. So I just wanted to kind of move on here and talk a little bit about, I mentioned we had the survey, we did listening sessions, we've been having conversations with a lot of you. So just talk a little bit about what the results of some of this outreach has been in terms of what we heard. So there are a couple of recurring themes that kind of kept coming up as we were having these conversations, came up in the survey, listening sessions. One of them was about the engagement process itself as part of this. So basically, the question that was, what we were really pushed on is how do we bring more residents into this process? I think that's really an open question. We're trying different things here, whether that's Facebook Live or having events on Saturday. Bringing on an outreach coordinator in the fall who will help us kind of get to the finish line on this. But all of those, those are single discrete actions. This is a broader, systemic challenge that we definitely recognize as, something for us to work on, and we're excited to kind of continue to hear from all of you about ways that we can improve and ways that we can work with you to kind of further that engagement. We heard from a lot of folks about industrial emissions. So kind of the role of the, South Philadelphia refinery, other large emitters in the city, kind of how does that fit into our energy vision, into the energy system. So I think historically this has been a place where our office has not had as much expertise, so I think we're kind of starting to develop that in response really to what we're hearing from a lot of you. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly and kind of how we're bringing that into this vision. And the last piece was around co-benefits. So just kind of continuing to recognize, this whole conversation has been focused on reducing our carbon footprint and reducing greenhouse gases and reliance on fossil fuels and curbing climate change. Those are all really important. That's a really important goal. But there's other pieces to this, right? Whether we're talking about health and air quality, we're talking about jobs and prosperity and making energy affordable for our most vulnerable residents, talking about education. So I think these are all pieces that we really want to make sure are kind of lifted up in this plan, and I hope you'll continue to push us on that as we move forward. So just kind of some specifics from both the survey and the listening sessions. On the survey side, for those of you who took the survey, you probably saw one of the first questions basically asked, how much do you know about energy? And I think we know a lot of you folks have been part of this process for quite a while. You're experts on this issue. You've been working in energy a lot longer than I have, and we really respect and kind of admire your expertise. We also heard from a lot of folks who completed the survey and said, honestly, I don't know that much about energy yet, and I want to learn more. So I think that piece really kind of lifted up to us the role that education needs to play in the citywide energy vision, and really all the work that we're doing moving forward. So I think that's a really important goal for us. Kind of along those lines, we kind of heard a request to learn more about the programs that already exist. So PA Power Switch is a great example. That's a website you can go to. You can choose your electricity supplier. You can choose 100% renewable generation in Pennsylvania. That's a thing that we try to talk about whenever we're out in the world. But we heard from a lot of people in the survey they didn't know about that. They didn't know about PICO's Smart Ideas program, which is providing incentives for efficiency in your home and business. So there's a lot of great work that's happening at the city level or happening at the regional level that a lot of residents maybe don't have a great sense of because they don't have the advertising budgets of whoever in Philadelphia. So I think we're again really committed to kind of trying to do that education moving forward. And the last piece is I think somewhat to Minal's point, but just generally this idea of action across all government. So yes, please continue to push the city of Philadelphia to do more. There's a lot we've done and a lot more we can do, and we're excited to have that conversation with you. But a lot also needs to happen at the state level, at the federal level. This is the piece where this is the part of the presentation where I say these are long-term goals, right? So we have goals for 2025, we have goals for 2050. The government that's in office in Washington, D.C. right now, I promise you will not be in office in 2050. I'm pretty sure it's not physically possible. So that means that we can plan for what's happening in the short term in the absence of federal action, but we also have to keep our eye on that long-term ball as well. So this slide kind of talking a little bit about what we heard specifically from the listening sessions. There's a bunch of words on the slide. I'm not going to read them all. I know that for some of you in the back it might be a little bit hard to read them, so I'm happy to kind of share this with you afterwards. But basically, for those of you that were maybe not at the listening session, we asked folks to break up into a couple of groups based on the Greenworks energy vision, so that our energy system is clean, that it's affordable, and that it's efficient. So we heard a couple of things, again, kind of recurring themes across those three buckets. On the clean energy side, a lot of folks really asked us for more specifics on clean energy goals. So we were really excited that Mayor Kenny committed to a 100% renewable energy goal earlier this month. On the affordable energy side, I think again this education piece came up, and basically letting folks know the programs that are out there on efficiency and increasingly on renewable energy, they're not just about saving energy, they're also about saving money. And energy is the second biggest household cost for Philadelphians. Philadelphia has one of the highest energy burdens of any large U.S. city, which means basically the number of residents who struggle to pay their electric or their gas bills every month. So we really recognize this as a key piece to kind of connect those two goals. And then likewise on the efficient side, kind of making that explicit link between poverty reduction and energy. I think this is a place where there's been amazing work done by the Energy Coordinating Agency, and a lot of folks historically have been doing great work on this, and I think we need to continue to lift that up, and we hope to do that through this plan. So I'm going to just talk a little bit, shifting gears here, about what we're thinking about for this, for the Citywide Energy Vision report that we're hoping to put out this fall, and then I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk a little bit in more detail about some of the modeling that we've done. So kind of there's two pieces on the slide, and the first is around values. So I mentioned the Greenworks vision for energy is that our energy system is clean, that's affordable to our residents, that's efficient. That really came out of conversations we had in the community with experts last year. I think that's continued to kind of been lifted up as being important over the course of this engagement process. But we were also asked, well, what about kind of the fact that the energy system isn't equal right now, right? So a lot of Philadelphians are, as I mentioned, are energy burdened. A lot of Philadelphians maybe are already living in environmental justice zones or living in places that are otherwise impacted by energy infrastructure. So I think it's really important to us to have this kind of value of a just energy system. And then lastly, that the energy system is resilient. As Sarah mentioned, we're already experiencing the effects of climate change. We're not going to tell you that they're going to go away. The climate change we're experiencing is only going in one direction. So kind of continuing to ensure that our energy system is resilient and continues to operate and serve residents as the climate changes. And then this last piece is kind of on the goals for the process. And I've already touched on both of these, but just to reiterate one more time. So kind of the first goal here is about education. So we're really saying, we as an office and as a city have a fair bit of knowledge about the energy system. We've been working with consultants, we've been talking to all of you to understand what are the things, what are the facts on the ground, what do we know? So we're hoping that this document can kind of serve as that, what is that? What is the SREC market, or what is FERC? So we can you can actually go and use this document in some ways as a toolkit in that sense. But the other piece that we're hoping to bring out of this process is something like a playbook. So Adam's about to talk about kind of the 5 areas of action where we're thinking basically the citywide energy vision will focus. And the goal basically is to say, across those different areas of focus, what are the things the city can do, right? What are the things that the state can do? What are the things the federal government can do? Not in the next 3.5 years, maybe after that. What are the things that residents and businesses and community groups can work together to do as well? So not saying we're committing to one of those things or 10 of those things, but saying these are the potential options. And again, let's continue this conversation to prioritize them and move forward and actually implement these different actions. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk a little bit more about our energy system in detail.
Thanks, Rich. So to start off, I guess I just want to explain what we've done so far. So we've got a model that we've been building with our consultants to sort of understand what different kind of areas can look like, but in terms of projects and investments and programs and things like that. But it all starts basically with a business as usual scenario. So what you're seeing is kind of the first peek behind the curtain of what the model has right now. Business as usual right now is represented by this black line, so we're right around in here somewhere. What I've got is basically a linear goal to, if we were going to hit a 80 by 50 reduction, and then kind of the middle part here is what the Paris Accord would kind of provide if the United States had signed it. So this is not to say that our goal is necessarily going to be a linear goal. It's but it is to kind of show that that's just a representation of what that looks like. So what we've got in our business as usual scenario, again, our black line up here is basically some really broad assumptions. We've made assumptions on what's going to happen with population growth in the city, what's going to happen with business growth in the city. One of the key ones, what's going to happen on our emissions factors for electricity. So is our grid going to get cleaner? Is it going to get dirtier? If you look at what, this is a federal government business as usual, so this is the annual energy outlook from 2016, which is a product from the Energy Information Agency. But basically it's the Department of Energy. They're assuming that it's going to be basically almost a grid that looks a lot like it looks like today. So it's not terribly inspiring in that sense. As we look to our goal, we know that we've got to start to sort of see how we tweak those assumptions and how we can kind of influence those things. So this is, again, industry and buildings kind of broadly. And we're going to kind of dive in and talk a little bit about where we see kind of potential. So how will we get to kind of this 80 by 50? What we've tried to do is, through all the different things that we've kind of plugged into our model and all the things that we've looked at, we've tried to kind of quantify them and then sort of put them into different buckets of potentials, of reduction possibilities. So the numbers that we're going to present here are not necessarily exact, but they're kind of a framework of what we think could happen in these certain areas. As we go towards the near term, as we're looking at like 2020, things look better than as we kind of go out to 2040, 2050, because we really just don't know what's going to happen with technology as we get further out. So, but basically we're looking at 5 different buckets. Energy efficient homes and businesses, a cleaner electricity grid, citywide rooftop solar, low carbon thermal energy, and low carbon economy. And I'm going to go through each one of these and talk a little bit about some of the different kind of things that are within those kind of potential buckets. Before I do that, I just want to stress just how hard pretty much each one of these is. And I've got some specific examples of what some of these kind of changes look like. But I do want to stress that this is not a kind of walk in the park. Business as usual is drastically different than what we're kind of proposing in terms of the 5 kind of potentials. So we can kind of jump in from here. So the first one we're going to talk about, energy efficient homes and businesses. Kind of an easy place to start for us because it's something that's really familiar to the city of Philadelphia. We have a building benchmarking law that requires large facilities to benchmark their energy use and report that publicly. So we've modeled a kind of a really broad sense of what different interventions from the city could look like. Things like expanding our benchmarking program to basically have some requirements associated with it or some minimum threshold. We've also looked at what if the state actually adopted modern building codes? Wouldn't that be novel and helpful? What would that kind of do in the long term in terms of influencing our energy usage? We've got things like the 2030 district, which is being launched from DVGVC. We've tried to, again, kind of encompass as much opportunity as we've seen out there in the kind of public policy space to understand what energy efficiency can get us in terms of a carbon reduction. So overall, this is kind of our waterfall graph, and we're going to come back to a couple of these. But basically what it's looking at is 2016, this is what, again, our buildings and industry carbon emissions are at. If we implemented just energy efficiency alone, we've got basically a yellow reduction, and our emissions would kind of level out to here. Now, this is about 36% of our buildings and industry, a 36% reduction of carbon just from energy efficiency in buildings and industry. But I want to stress that we can't just take these numbers and these wedges as we go through them and just stack them on top of each other, because as we start to get a cleaner grid, this number starts to go down because we're not, because the electricity that we save is not necessarily as dirty as it was in this scenario. So this is, again, assuming that we've got a business as usual grid. So I'm going to go through each individually, and then at the end I'm going to kind of stack them all together. But before I do that, I just want to make sure I get a couple of nods that makes some sense. Okay, great. The other thing I just wanted to add is that when we're talking about energy efficiency, these are usually kind of profitable investments. So this is a great place to kind of start. Energy efficiency is typically focused on saving money and not just spending money. Some of these other investments, I think, it's harder to say that as you kind of go along and you start to gobble things together, though we haven't really studied all the cost savings potential in these things. So again, kind of potential from energy efficiency. Next one that everybody likes to talk about, cleaner electricity grid. So a couple kind of actions that we're looking at right now. City government basically leading by example, procuring a portion of its electricity from renewable resources. That's an opportunity we're kind of looking at. The Clean Power Plan is a program that was proposed basically to do exactly this. It is very much kind of on the rocks right now in terms of the possibility of it going forward, but that something like that or some sort of a federal kind of program would be crucially helpful to sort of putting us on this pathway. Rich mentioned PA Power Switch. Again, these are some of the kind of ideas that we can look at. Is can we kind of really spur the voluntary market and get people to really voluntarily choose renewable energy, whether that be just kind of city government or kind of a group of large institutions here in Philadelphia. So potential from a clean electricity grid, this is about 31% reduction just by cleaning the electricity grid in Philadelphia. And this is basically assuming that we're not doing any energy efficiency, but all of a sudden, magically, we've got a carbon-free electricity grid. And I'm focusing, I should have also said, I'm focusing on carbon here. We do have some numbers that talk about air quality and talk about some of the other co-benefits. But for the purpose of this conversation right now, I'm just showing these graphs are really all representing carbon and carbon equivalents. But we do have some of that numbers, and again, it's some of it's modeled, but 31% again on the clean electricity grid. That's great, but again, when we start overlapping these, they start to kind of eat into one another. So we'll sort of see how they all combine as we go through a little bit further. Citywide solar is another technology that we've citywide rooftop solar, sorry, that we looked at. So their city can certainly do things in this. This is kind of having incentives or running programs like the Philadelphia Energy Authority's Solarize program for Philadelphia. Folks might be familiar with that launched, I guess, 2 months ago. So there's certain things the city can do, but ultimately there's also some really big things the state can do. The state of Pennsylvania has an alternative energy portfolio standard. That's kind of the key thing that incentivizes solar in a lot of states is these alternative energy portfolio standards or renewable portfolio standards. So reform at the state level from that would be tremendously helpful in expanding renewable electricity in Philadelphia. So what we've done is kind of model really broadly what this would look like, and this is a little bit of a shocking number. So hang on, let me take a sip of water. So what we've modeled is taking some information that we found basically. If we took 80% or 70 to 80% of viable rooftops that are out there in the city of Philadelphia, put solar panels on them, and generated that in the city of Philadelphia, what does that look like? And again, this is rough numbers. We're trying to refine this and get better. And roughly, solar on its own is about citywide rooftop solar is about 4% of carbon reduction just from that initiative. So I was a little bit disheartened when I saw this. I think that what's also disheartening is when you look at it from a standpoint of what exactly does this mean in terms of size of solar. So this would be, the citywide, if we were to be doing this, it'd be installing about 40 megawatts a year of rooftop solar. 40 megawatts a year of rooftop solar is comparable to the 3 megawatt project down at Lincoln Financial Field that the Eagles did. So we're talking about 13 projects of the same size as Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia annually for the next 33 years. So is it a solution? Yeah. Is it helpful? Yes, but it's not kind of a silver bullet by any means. So it's a little bit disheartening, the scale and the thing. And we've got some kind of shocking numbers for this, but we don't have shocking numbers for all of them. But I did want to share that with you, just to kind of give you a framework of how big of a mountain some of these kind of initiatives are to climb. Low carbon thermal energy, and this is a little bit of a tricky kind of area to explain, but what we're looking at here is there district energy systems that we can explore? Is there biofuels that we can explore? Is there electrification that we can explore? So can we change some of our heating systems in our homes to really efficient heat pumps that run on electricity? And the idea there is that when we have it run on electricity will eventually be a cleaner grid, and we've got a clean grid, we've got a electrification for heating source, and those two combined kind of work really nicely together. On its own, it's really not that helpful. So on its own, we're looking at basically a 2% reduction. And the reason, again, this is where when you start to stack these solutions, these start to change a little bit. So this is represented by basically taking 50% of our thermal energy and basically switching it to electricity just on its own. Though it could also there could be a kind of room for biofuels in the other model that we're going to show in a little bit. But again, on its own, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But when you start to look at it in concert with a clean electricity grid, and I'll show that slide later on, it starts to grow in its potential for carbon reduction. Last thing is low carbon economy. So what we're talking about is looking at existing industrial facilities and understanding sort of how can we reduce their usage. So this ties into a lot of social justice issues, a lot of kind of health and air quality issues with existing industry. We've got some really, really rough numbers in terms of what this looks like. And I'll just be blunt with what we've done right now is to say, okay, well, what if we basically said that the industry reached its 80% by 2050 on its own? We know we've got to do a lot more studying and a lot more work to understand what are the point sources, what are the other industries that are really contributing to this. But again, we're kind of looking at this in the arena of what's the potential. That's kind of what we've modeled thus far. So again, looking at industry on its own, it's about a 15% reduction in carbon emissions if they reach their kind of 80 by 50 goal. And we're going to explore this a lot more. And this is partially in response, as Rich was saying, to some of the feedback that we got from the engagement sessions, that people really wanted us to understand industry and be able to kind of communicate effectively about how industry is impacting our carbon and air quality and other kind of goals. So we've got these 5 buckets. Now we got to kind of bring them all together, and this is really the key slide. So we've got our 2006 baseline and then our 2050 kind of goal here. We're taking our previous reductions that we've done thus far. We're adding in kind of our energy efficiency, which if you notice, it's really shrunk a good bit because we've cleaned up the electricity grid. You've got your clean electricity grid, which is massive. You've got citywide rooftop solar, which is actually included in the clean electricity grid, because now you're basically kind of joining forces with those two things and saying that, rooftop solar is part of the electricity grid, and there's truly a distributed energy system. And our low carbon thermal energy is now kind of expanded because we've got a clean electricity grid to sort of displace that. So as we move away from a fossil fuel based heating and towards a clean kind of heating source, our electricity as heating, again, that gets a little bit bigger. And then finally, our low carbon economy. But again, only under kind of all these situations do we actually get in the ballpark of hitting an 80% reduction by 2050. So it's a little bit shocking for us. We're looking to dig into this a lot more and really understand how all these features interact. But this is the great time to sort of pause for a second, because I'm sure there's a few questions. Yeah, in the back.
Does this final modeling scenario make any assumptions of technology?
No, great question. So for example, solar panels. Right now, we basically said, okay, we're going to take the solar panel that you can buy, regularly in the market right now. You've been following solar technology; it's been getting better and better and better. Same thing with heat pump technology. We didn't feel like we wanted to make broad assumptions on technologies. I think some of the playbook items are going to be exactly that. Follow the technology, make sure that we're updating the model to sort of respond to that technology advance, whether we're talking about district energy or solar panels or any other thing. But that is a limitation right now of the model.
I would just add, the nice thing about the model and the tool that we're developing is that it is a model and a tool, and we can change those assumptions. So as technology improves or new things come online, we do have the ability to kind of change these numbers to reflect that. So that was really one of the big goals of this process for us, was to say, if solar prices plunged or a new technology came out, there's like the Tesla shingles now, or those kinds of things, like how would those impact some of these numbers? So I think we're committed to continuing to monitor that, but as you see technologies that you're curious about, feel free to send them to us so we can have that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of development and construction going on in the city, and I don't know what their plans are for heat and electricity, and I wonder what is the city doing to make sure they not only are as efficient as their technologies are today, but will they be able to be upgraded or
Yeah, so I think the question, just for anybody that didn't hear it, was basically about new development and how do we ensure that new development is future compatible to some extent? Well, so I think part of that, there's a couple of things. There's some levers the city has, there's some levers that I think the state has. At its core, we've got energy codes would be, again, really helpful. Robust and newer energy codes for the state and hopefully the city, but also the state as a broader kind of goal would be extremely helpful in kind of assuring that you've got a base efficiency. We talked a little bit about the programs that we've got for benchmarking. There's possibilities to add in things on requiring commissioning and requiring kind of investments. Right now, there's not a lot of, I'd say, sticks the city has to sort of force high energy efficient development. A lot of those levers really live at the state.
Yeah, I would just give a little bit more background on the building benchmarking program. So we require all large commercial and multifamily buildings, 50,000 square feet and larger, to track their energy and water usage and report it to us. We disclose it once a year. And the idea there is that, A, we get some information so that we can help them to identify opportunities for improvement, but B, also we're trying to create a marketplace where folks understand the energy implications of their space choices. And much like you wouldn't buy a car without understanding its fuel economy, we're trying to make that, to create the norm that you wouldn't rent or purchase space without understanding its efficiency.
And I would just add one more piece on there, which is, if you look at this chart, we have to do all these things to get to 80 by 50, right? This is a huge challenge, and we all have to kind of be a part of that. And one of the pieces of we all are the folks who are developing, right? So the companies who are leasing in those spaces, but then also all of us as residents to say, let's have this conversation. I think there's been some interesting work happening over at the Schuylkill Arts development in the last couple of weeks. They just had an announcement about how they're really trying to foster a diverse workforce, right? That's a great example of development kind of responding to people saying, like, the status quo is not equitable, it's not fair, we want to see something better. And I think that that's an example of the kind of citizen action that can really impact some of these conversations down the line.
So how would you compare the barriers of tech versus corporate and political will? And are there any other barriers towards reaching
Yeah, I would say we haven't really gotten to, we're getting so into the energy modeling that, you know, we haven't thought deeply about the barriers. We've been really thinking about opportunities. And so I think that,
I would just say again, like to me, the barrier is that we have to do all of these things in a really short period of time, and we have very limited control, right? So like that's like, it's a bunch of barriers, but it's also this one big barrier of like, again, how do we go deeper, quicker? And I think that's something where, you know, we're trying to figure out, again, what's our role in that? What's everyone in Philadelphia's role in that? If there's kind of specific things that you were like, that seemed like a barrier. Did you guys think about that? Definitely let us know, and let's just keep talking about that. Because I do think if there are barriers that you identify that maybe we can see kind of clear through, or we can talk to another city who's maybe solved that and share that back with Philadelphians, I think we're happy to do that.
sure, go ahead.
Just directly related to that is that one thing is, do you have a process for accepting unsolicited proposals from public-private partnerships that help you achieve your vision? And if you don't, then...
So we don't. The Philadelphia Energy Authority is actually working on that right now. So if there are unsolicited proposals on that, I think that's a more appropriate place for that to be solicited. The city has a really strict rules about how it procures things. And the Energy Authority follows a lot of those rules, but is not necessarily bound by all of those. So I think the best way for us to kind of go down that path would be to make an introduction.
Yes.
Thanks so much for hosting us. My question was, the clean electricity grid component is a huge part of the overall savings. You talk a lot in the report about how you get that number, and you give us a little like how do you model the regional grid, and
Right.
what are the different scenarios there?
So the question is, how do we model the grid, and how is that such a big piece of this waterfall graph?
So again,
What is the percentage again? Can you?
So this is representative of 100% clean energy, which we're basically carbon-free electricity. We haven't made the distinction between renewable or not. That's something I think we're interested in kind of hearing from you guys about. Is how do you define clean? It's something we've heard a little bit about from folks, but we are talking about carbon-free electricity. And basically, it's a really simple calculation when you look at it that way. So
100%.
you're zeroing out electricity emissions.
Is that, and that's over time, so
Right now, again, we're looking at potentials. So we're saying 2050, what's the potential? The potential is 100%. The potentials also could be 90%, and that looks like a smaller graph than that.
And the percentage of carbon reductions is actually taking up out of the total reduction, the 80%. What was that number again?
I don't have it for this slide. I've got it for the standalone. I'm gonna have to go back and look at that. But again, we're looking at potentials.
Yeah.
So it's not. We're not trying to
So
say.
you're committing right now.
We're not.
Delivered to you solely by us.
Me committing doesn't really get you much. So, to show how little power I have.
But if we could flip that switch tomorrow.
But I guess what I'm saying is that the potentials is kind of the what we need to figure out is what's the pathway through these, and kind of how does that work together, and maybe what have we missed as well. Ron.
What are some of the details of when is the model assumption available for us?
I think as we go to a draft, we'll certainly be kind of articulating what, not just what kind of energy efficiency homes and businesses are getting, but what the layers of that look like. We haven't quite figured out exactly how to communicate that, but I think that's the intention. Is to sort of give folks, look, this is how this was basically modeled.
Yeah, I would just add, I think that goes back to the earlier kind of the comment that we heard in the feedback of like, there's a wide range of expertise, right? There's folks who really want to dig into the model, and we love you and we're going to support you and help you do that. And then there's the folks who really just kind of want to understand what can they do. And I think we're trying to cater to all of those audiences as much as we can.
Oh, sorry.
How does this compare to other cities who are trying to meet similar goals?
I think it's comparable. I think what you've seen from some cities is kind of really prescriptive paths. And in some cases, those are from cities that have a lot more, I think, kind of control and or buy-in and or data. So example, it would be like New York City has got a very prescriptive path, I think, to how they want to get to an 80% reduction by 2050. The the difference is they've got a really robust, or a governor that's extremely bought in, and they've got a power system that's kind of already transitioning, and there's a very different level of political will. So I think what we're trying to do is be responsive to where we are, which is, you know, in Pennsylvania, and with a legislature and a governor that maybe are not as kind of gung-ho, you know, yet. And so how do we basically build out those assumptions to kind of get there?
Right, and we also, Pennsylvania part of that? Yeah, absolutely, and we will definitely outline that, yeah. But the other thing is just to say that part of the reason why ours is less prescriptive is back to the technology question is we're happy to be pretty committed into what we think needs to happen in the short term, but you know, we really do think that this is iterative and you've got to go back and remodel.
Yeah.
You know, a model of 2050's energy system is basically like at this point, right? And so
Yeah.
we're trying to be responsible. Yeah, we're trying to be responsible and talk about what potentials 2050 might look like, and not. You know, we don't have a crystal ball any more than you guys do, but we do want to.
If anyone has a crystal ball, would you?
Yeah, are you holding it on us? You know, we want to sort of we want to define where we think our collective eyes should be watching, and where we think that potential changes would be that would really either dramatically change the modeling. So that's part of a nuance here that I think hasn't necessarily been tackled in other.
I think the other part of that too just is that the city alone doing this is somewhat meaningless, you know. So in some ways it's the city government leading the citizens to some extent, leading businesses, leading somewhat the region, and somewhat leading the state, and sort of, you know, as much as we can pushing those institutions. So I think that's kind of what we're trying to say is that, you know, if our goal was to basically have a technically responsive 80 by 50 plan that we can totally influence and totally do right now, that's not really all that helpful. You know, it's more helpful to kind of have this potential framework and understand exactly sort of what the key levers are that lifts kind of everybody along that pathway.
Yes.
Yes. So does this model for reduction potentials make any basic assumptions about trends in population growth?
Yes. Yeah, it assumes basically DVRPC's population growth trends. So something that we can certainly kind of talk about whether that's to be higher or lower or whatever. You know, it's a base assumption.
And that's all included in the very first sort of blue baseline?
That's
or?
included as in that black line that I was showing as it goes
Okay.
up to 2050.
I would just add, I think that's a great question, and I think it gets into this larger question, right? Of not only are we kind of trying to basically make the grid cleaner, but in a lot of ways we're also trying to move folks onto the grid, right? So we're talking a little bit in that low carbon thermal energy about moving our homes potentially out of gas furnaces and onto the grid. We're talking about, not in this particular piece, but you know, in general, we're having a conversation about electric vehicles and how much that will influence the grid. So I think all of those grid projections are kind of, right now, they're based on general population growth, but we don't really know. And I think that's another piece where we're going to continue to kind of be remodeling and looking at these trends and kind of having that be a part of our core value going forward.
All right, we've got time for 3 more questions. So Rob, Paul, and then
So does your projection of energy demand for the city include additional cooling for housing and businesses that will be needed as the city warms up due to climate change?
It does not right now. We've got, again, a growth assumption that's based off of job growth, population growth, and kind of business as usual kind of energy use per capita. But that's certainly something we can look at. It's really hard to predict, so I think
Well,
it's...
anything to know, for instance, like what portion of houses have air conditioning?
We do not.
Probably, the census has that, I think.
I think we
if
could...
you know it.
Yeah,
I think we could go down that path. I think, again, under the kind of umbrella of potentials, you know, we want to be in the ballpark, you know, and so that's what we're trying to basically do. I think we've hit the big buckets in that sense. It's a great point, yeah.
You might want to ask DVRPC to apply.
Did you see it? Just did.
I just have a clarifying question. So the 80 by 50 is overall energy use in buildings,
And industry.
and you're looking to reach that by making your electricity 20% clean, as well as all of these other items. So that assumes that block that's left at 20%, that's natural gas.
To some extent, yeah, it's natural gas, it's other kind of point source.
Does it assume
from buildings and energy?
continued increase in the use of natural gas for things like combined heat and power plants?
So district energy is something where, and combined heat and power is definitely kind of fits within that. It's something we're kind of trying to figure out. We've kind of put that roughly in the low carbon thermal energy space. I think that there's a potential for CHP within this because it can be a low carbon tool, but it's not carbon free certainly. So there's definitely a kind of a cost there. I think where we see it has been kind of where can district energy kind of be anchors for, or sorry, where can combined heat and power be anchors for district energy systems that are required, a high level of resiliency. So things like maybe hospitals and areas that are, they have to work, they've got to run. And but again, as technology changes, that may not be the case. But that's kind of
exactly a barrier that we're not talking about. Yeah.
The concern I have is when you invest in that technology, you've got to run it for 20, 30 years. You're kind of stuck with that, and so you're stuck with that level of carbon emissions.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, we're not kind of being prescriptive in the technologies here, and I think to Sarah's crystal ball point, when we're talking about 2050, that's a great question. What will the residual emissions be in 2050? We really don't know. I think that's a conversation for all of us to have. I think it is a barrier, absolutely. So I think that's definitely kind of for us to continue to work on as a community. But it's not something that's kind of a specific piece of what we're talking about in these hydrants.
The last thing I'll say is, there's also potential for biogas and things like that. We have a biogas cogeneration plant at a city facility that's, and it certainly works. So, there's other kind of ways to think about CHP in the long run as well.
If the state pulls so much of your reduction potential, how is the city engaging with the state?
Yeah, so we have lobbyists. We employ lobbyists at both the state and the federal level. We have interpersonal relationships. The mayor knows the governor. We have our advocacy community. We're trying to inform you guys so that you understand where the levers are at the state and federal government, so that you can show your elected officials what you want and be educated in your asks of them. So we're trying to amoeba and come at it from all angles. Yeah, exactly. We're trying to understand who influences what and how we have power and influence in those spheres.
And that is a great transition to our last slide, actually, and we'll continue to kind of have this conversation. I will just briefly kind of touch on, and won't go through these, but kind of the different benefits. Again, just reiterating one more time, we talked a lot about climate change today, we talked a lot about carbon emissions, we talked a lot about fossil fuels. There's other important benefits here that are part of a citywide energy vision, and we're excited to keep talking about that. But basically, one too many. So kind of what's next? Again, there's kind of the take action, right? So there were Greenworks on the ground that I think we're sitting here. You can also get them online. These are the one-page guides Sarah mentioned that are kind of what you can do as individuals, as community groups, and as large institutions to advance all of the Greenworks visions, including our energy and climate visions. For those of you who are maybe thinking about some of these advocacy questions, the city developed a kind of an action guide in response to what's happening at the federal level. We developed them for a number of important issues, including healthcare, immigration, sanctuary cities. There is one for the environment. If you go to that little URL, you can find them. You can also go on the city's website. And then lastly, for us, what's next? Again, we're going to continue to kind of stay here and chat with all of you. If you have ideas, I have business cards here. I'm happy to give them to you. Send us emails, sustainability@phila.gov. And as I mentioned, we're going to spend the summer writing, and we're going to come back in the fall with the draft for you all to look at, see if we heard you, see if there's other things that you really want to be included in this initial vision. And then from there, we're going to kind of continue this conversation as we move into implementation, what we can do and what we can all do. So we're happy to take a couple more questions, but I know we're going to be respectful of folks' time. So we just wanted to thank you all one more time for coming.
We still need a bi-directional conversation where if you're drafting a document, we should be able to add comments on it before you even publish it.
That's
the whole point. We're going to put out the draft in the fall, and it's going to be open for comment.
So you can put in
now,
there's no draft yet. So as soon as it's ready, we're definitely going to ask for feedback. Yeah. So we're not holding out. There's no draft. We just showed you what we have, and that's why we're having this event, to get your feedback on it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. First, I think it's wonderful that Philadelphia is setting the example and trying to encourage any of these things. But I also wanted to ask that, I mean, the city does have some control and some legal obligations. And I would like to ask, if it's part of the plan, if it's not to add, to leverage its local control over zoning and permitting, to do things like requiring environmental justice and public health concerns to be conditions before someone can even apply for an air quality permit. Right now, they're not. And the air management basically feels constrained, saying we can only do what we're allowed to do. The people that want permits say we'll only do what the feds and the state require us to do. I would just like to ask Philadelphia to please leverage the control it has.
Yeah.
That's a great comment.
Yep. Yeah,
And I will just add, Amanda has been here diligently taking notes on everything everyone has said today. So we are listening and we are writing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and we are definitely committed to outlining what our opportunities are. And we're not, us pointing to other levers is not an abdication of our own levers. That's a huge part of the point of this planning. Yeah.
But if we maximize use of environmental justice and protecting public health, we can reach a lot of these goals without even mentioning that it's energy.